when the liberal group got a exempt status, and 3 that I just mentioned didn't for over 2 years. Mr. Nunes mentioned Ms. Lerner. Who was her boss in 2011 and 2012? Who did she report to?
I believe it would have been
Sarah Ingram, maybe?
Part of that time, and part of that time another gentleman.
Okay. And that other gentleman has since submitted his resignation?
I believe so.
And what is Ms. Ingram doing today? What's her job title?
She works on on implementing the Affordable Care Act.
Okay. Who promoted her to that position?
I would have moved her into that position.
Why would you promote somebody to that position who was in charge of the exempt organization division, which certainly has had some controversy over the last couple years, under an investigation?
Because she is a superb civil servant, sir.
So she had nothing to do with this?
I wouldn't imagine so.
Even
By the way, I can't speak to individual cases. I can say generally, we provided horrible customer service here. I will admit that. We did. Horrible customer service.
You
Whether it was
targeted
politically motivated or not is a very different question.
You targeted an individual, an American, who still doesn't know to this day why he was question number 26.
All right, time has expired. Mr. Becerra is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your testimony. And let me key off of something, Mr. Miller, you said. You said foolish mistakes were made. I think the President actually said it better. He said that the handling of those tax-exempt applications in that process at the IRS was outrageous and intolerable. No excuse. And as much as we know that the folks at IRS have a thankless job because they have to go and tell their fellow Americans that they may be audited or they have to do this work understaffed, we have to maintain the confidence in the system because it's a voluntary system of payment of our taxes.
Agreed.
And so you are right. It was a foolish mistake, but the President's even more correct that it was outrageous and intolerable. Now, let me also focus on something, Mr. George, you said. When you were asked, was there any finding or evidence of political motivation here, you said no.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And so what we find is a situation where inexcusable activity took place because it erodes the confidence of the American people in a system where they participate voluntarily. And if there's a place in public service where you have to have the highest level of conduct and standards, it's at the IRS. And so, Mr. Miller, I think it's unfortunate for those who are in positions of authority, but the buck has to stop somewhere, and I think that's exactly what we're saying. That should not diminish the good work that has been done by anyone within the IRS over the years. And so I hope you understand that you are here today talking to us because we need to get to the bottom of this. We need to clean up and clear out so we can go back to the business of making sure that people respect the fact that we have a voluntary system of paying our taxes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Miller, I want to talk a little about the culture of the organization. As looking at the note, your bio, 90,000 employees, $12 billion budget. You've been there 25 years. I'm concerned, and I guess to start off, you know, we've got a mission statement there. I'm very concerned about the breadth and the depth of maybe what's going on. I think a lot of employees probably do a good job, but I've been a person that's been in business 30 years and run larger organizations. So you've got a mission statement in terms of talking about working for the American people, doing what's right, playing by the rules. Is that something that's internalized at the IRS, or is that just something on a website?
So I believe, Congressman, it's internalized, and the vast majority of our folk are hardworking, incredibly honest people. I'm going to tell you, and you guys should hear that as these discussions occur, as you know, it's damaging to the morale of those people. And we, you know, it's probably ultimately damaging to the sense of voluntary compliance, which underlies our entire tax system.
Well, let me just say, I think, obviously, I think there's probably a lot of good people but at the same time, we've got a massive PR problem at minimum.
We do.
And this has got to be dealt with quickly, and it can't just drag on for 6 months to a year. So I think we need to get to the bottom of it. The other thing, let me just ask, in terms of that size organization, who's in charge? Who's the boss? How is that hierarchy? How does it work? You know, I ran a very decentralized business where I had a corporate structure, but I had managers and partners in different operations. How is the IRS, you know, in terms of being an acting commissioner? You've been there 25 years. Who do you report to, or the commissioner ideally in the past, who do they report to? And at what point, when something like this comes up, who's involved at the next level up?
So the reporting chain in the organization is, there are 2 deputies, and reporting to the commissioner, and the commissioner reports to the deputy secretary of Treasury.
Who's ultimately responsible?
The commissioner, acting commissioner, not the Treasury. The Treasury relationship is such that they would not be involved.
So who would be responsible for you? Who basically asked you to resign or fired you?
It would be Secretary Lew.
Secretary Treasurer. The other thing is, let me ask you, there's been 2 people that have been, were you terminated or fired? What happened there? Or are you getting ready to retire?
I was asked to resign, and I will retire.
Okay.
As under the civil service rules.
Now, on what basis do you feel like you're getting asked, and maybe one other person, I guess, got asked, but it seems like there's a lot of other people, ideally in Cincinnati and Washington and other parts, that haven't been held accountable?
I'm not sure what the question is, sir. If I could answer it and then tell me if I'm answering the wrong question.
Okay, go ahead.
We're not done yet. We're not. We now have the Treasury Inspector General's report. We now have the sense of the facts. Now is the time for those that remain, including the incoming acting commissioner, Mr. Werfel, to take those actions.
Let me mention, as it's been brought up with a couple of the ladies that work with you, Lois Lehner and Sarah Ingram, what's being done about those 2? Because they've been in the press. There's a lot of concern about that. They ran a large operation, and it seems to be at the heart of the issues today. I think that's got to get dealt with in a very aggressive, clear way in the next week or 2.
I don't know whether it will be or not. That will be up to the new acting commissioner.
All right. Well, might as well start this off as best we can. We'll start the recording. The recording started. It is Education by Ed. It is a Sunday. It is August 5th, 2018. And what you heard was the soundbite known as Exhibit 05051 with the former IRS commissioner in a Senate hearing. Basically, if you listen closely, it stated multiple times that taxes were voluntary. I just like to throw that in every once in a while so everybody can, especially come April time. That's a good time to throw in the tax thing. But we have Ed, and well, I guess we should let him speak. So, Ed, why don't you take the show away and educate some people?
Thank you. I appreciate it. We'd like to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We are blessed on these adventures. And that's the one thing that when you hear this statements from the IRS, public servants, employees, and under the 1932, what is it called, Administration Act, when they incorporated, and that's executive order, from Bill Clinton that says we're all corporations. Okay, this is the one thing that people don't comprehend. They are telling you this stuff, so either you know you're lawful or legal under the 14th Amendment. And I don't give a darn what all these crazy people out there are arguing about the 13th and 14th Amendment. Do they know the truth? The 13th Amendment was never, ever, ever ratified. It was passed by administration because they couldn't get it ratified because of the terrorists that were involved back then. Because if they got it ratified, that means there would have been a separation of lawful and legal, and that's the way the 13th Amendment was actually written by administrative codes. The 14th Amendment was actually written by administrative codes on that. The 13th Amendment says that, judges, attorneys, and cops and all this stuff have to register and file. So separate the difference. You have to step out of the movie and watch the production back then. You have to remember a lot of these people back then, at that time when they were doing the 14th Amendment legislation and the 14th Amendment to ratify. And don't forget the 14th Amendment was the Dred Scott case. The Dred Scott case clearly outlines either you're a slave or you're not. That means you have to know how to claim yourself, own yourself, and register yourself out of their British Corporation Vatican Bible system. It's that simple. And when you step out of the movie and watch the productions, that's why I always recommend a movie called Interstate 60. Everybody needs to watch that at least twice so you comprehend. We're not talking personal and property damage, personal injury, slander or something like that. We're talking infractions. That's what the case means. The movie, the guy drives into town, he gets a summons to show up in court because, supposedly he killed some guy's dog. That never existed. And everybody does that. That's what you get a summons for. Especially when it's Rotary sign or it's corporation sign. Because the only way a warrant could actually be lawfully and legally issued is by a grand jury of 12, not 6. 6 is maritime. Knowing when you're sitting on the deck of a ship compared to when you're sitting on land and soil. This is the one thing that people don't see. They don't open their minds. They're so channel vision, they don't open their minds to see how the structure of the game is played. And remember, this is a magic show. What's under, what cup? Pens and balls. Cup and balls, that's the one thing that Penn and Teller are very famous for. Then they walk you through it. That's the one thing amazes me how people don't see how simple the facts are right in front of your face. Everybody wants to jump to religion, and I need to forgive myself, and I need to plead on this case or that case. Well, that depends on how bad your conscience is. Because remember, a crime has to be physically done to personal property damage. Everything else is a traffic infraction, environmental infraction, violation, and that includes your city codes and administrative rules. Now, I do got a letter that I sent out that after tomorrow afternoon, I will be sending out to the sheriff of Baker County. I will have within 72 hours the ones for every sheriff in the state of Oregon Territory sent out. And that is the one thing. I'm setting this thing out, and some people have suggested to me, you're missing this or you're missing that. And my suggestion is that we want to leave some things open to their imagination. We want them to respond to see what their thoughts is on it. We want to see what they're responding to. We can quote that they're a lying bastard, son of a bitch, bastard, whatever we want to call them. But we want to put this structure together in a fashion that we want to leave it open because we want to hear their open imaginations or facts that they might provide. So when you go fishing, you have to entice that fish to the lure. And if you don't know how to work a lure to get a fish, then you're screwed. You don't eat. If you do, you eat. See, life is that structure, everything around you. I don't give a damn if it's whatever you imagine. All right, it's like the other point is when you're hungry, you go bear hunting, you want meat. You know, you go out vegetable hunting, you get to know what the mushrooms are, your vegetables in the forest are. You eat. You don't do that, you don't eat. It is so cut and dry. That's what amazes me about so many people, you know, that don't comprehend certain things. When you're sitting there baiting an animal in, remember, Title 7, 136, Section D, you're an animal. You're not a human. You don't think human. The only thing that makes you think human is a caution and compassion. Without caution, a conscience or compassion, you're not human. It's that simple. And we all lose. It's like former President terrorist Bush said, we want the animal laws not to exist. We want man laws to dictate to us how to flush a toilet. I don't want man laws to tell me how I'm flushing a toilet. Because you get man's laws telling you how to flush a toilet, you don't know how to flush a toilet. You get animal laws, hey, you know how to flush a toilet. See, laws are that, administrative rules and laws are that simple. But see, we don't correlate how simple things really are. And we always step out of the box without realizing what we're reading, thinking, or comprehending. And it is that simple when it really comes down to these things. And you got to step out of the movie and watch the production. And if you've never been deer hunting, elk hunting, bird hunting, or something like that, out or fishing, trying to get your food resources, you have no concept of what the reality of truth is. Most people think that you go on a computer and you can play these games and you think that you have a concept. You don't have a concept of any reality. You have a concept of what somebody's dictating to you how to think. You can imagine feelings, but until you've been through those things, you can't imagine the feelings until you physically live them. You can imagine and live in fantasy. Yes, everybody does that one time or another. But see, there's one point with that, is how do you know the truth when you're living in fantasy or reality? There's a lot of people that will portray an image instead of fact. And we all deal with that one. We all know that for reality fact. So the beauty of all this stuff is putting these pieces together and figuring out. Like I said, I recommend the movie Interstate 60 for everybody to watch at minimum twice. You watch it twice, you get a little bit more information. 3 times, you get a lot of information the way the courts work. You got to listen to the words that are being said. There's a lot of videos that we recommend on YouTube. One of them is, I got to say, from a good gentleman, Rob Ryder. Me and him have a conflict of belief on religion. That is the only conflict of belief that we have. But Rob, when he writes this stuff and brings this information to you, he does the damn research. You know, my problem is to go by what they call God. And I'll be blunt. Who's God? What God? Why God? Where is there God? Who is the God? Who is why the God? See, we got to come down to realistic. Now, we can believe in the fantasy of a God or an imitation of a God. Nobody could disagree with that one. I have my belief, my faith in the Great Spirit, Mother Earth, and the Creator. Without the Great Spirit and Mother Earth, you have no life. Without the Creator, none of us exist. It takes a man and woman to make life. It takes any other animal from any other structure to make a life. Deer, elk, duck, bird, whatever you want to call it. All right, you can sit there and go, oh, we need to do test tubes, we need to do this, we need to do that. Okay, let's do it. We've done it. We've proven some of the scientific points of view. But are we going to sit there and start cloning each other so that way we're not real, we're not human, we're a piece of plastic? And that's the direction we are actually living right now today. We are living this shit. People think that this stuff is like 20 years in the future. You're living it. I believe that we do have clones around us. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I've watched people that have been here and gone, and the next thing you know, they're here. What is their purpose? Why are they here? You got to look at these things. You got to back out of the movie and watch the production, what, why, and how. There are a lot of people that are out there standing for our rights. To make sure your right is not a privilege. And that means your Constitution right. Now, you might have an immigrant right or privilege, as some people say, well, I'm an immigrant and I have these rights. Well, who gave you those rights? You have to set those points where who gave you the rights, what, why, and how. And if you don't accept those facts of what, why, and how are you supposed to know that you have a right or a privilege? Now, immigration does have a privilege. They don't have rights. But immigration, so long as under the 1932 Banking Act and the compliance with the 1932 Bankruptcy Act, they gave them privileges so long as they paid their rights. They paid their rights, they have a right. We're not talking illegals. We're talking legal Americans that came through the channels correctly, took their oath to the Constitution and swore their life to the Constitution, and leaving their former beliefs and religions behind them. The United States does not have a religion. Everybody's trying to put the Bible and the Constitution as our religion. Morons. All right? The Bible is your belief, not mine. Your church is your belief, not mine. I don't believe it's anybody. A lot of people don't believe in that stuff. We know that Christianity has lost 50% of their followers just in the last 8 years. That's why the Pope and everybody's panicking. It's real. You can do the research, prove me wrong. You know, that's why I filed on these people's souls. And you got to realize the one thing. These men and women are out there saying, this is the way Jesus works, and this is the way the Bible works, and this is the way you're supposed to live. So long as you're not doing personal and property damage, the Constitution gives you a right to live the way you want in your freedom. The minute you do personal property damage or harm another living animal, man or woman, okay, or any other animal that could testify, then you have something to worry about. But when nobody speaks up, you have a constitutional right to believe in what your structure is. And we know this structure. It's been proven in the Supreme Court. It's in administrative court rulings and registrations. So I've filed all this stuff. I've made a lot of these articles public. And I'm putting out the deal that I'm waiting, and I'll have out tomorrow night, Tuesday. By Wednesday, I'll have all the sheriffs served in the 36 counties of Lincoln, the state of Oregon territory. We want to know if they work for you or I, or if they work for the corporation called religious belief of the court. Now, the sheriff's duty, legally, is the courts. He has no rights to be on the street. He has no rights traveling. Now, I don't have a conflict of interest with him being out on the street and traveling, so long as he honors his constitutional oath. And if he pulls somebody over that is a lawful bloodline American and has proved it, not arguing, breaking his windows, smashing him or her, causing personal property damage because they don't have a corporation license. See, that's like a marriage license. A marriage license means, and I don't like cussing, but a marriage license means, and if you understand the word fuck means fuck under the consent of the King of England. Fuck. A marriage license gives you permission to have sex. That's all it gives you, a permission to have sex. It doesn't do anything else. It ties you to the court system where a judge could take your assets and divide them up how he or she sees, unless you have a contract written. And if you don't have a contract written with your man or woman, or whatever, even for the gay and lesbians, write a damn contract. Quit whining and bitching that you want a marriage license. What fools are you? Write your own contract of it, and if they don't follow through the contract, Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution says the contract is binding, not legislative law. Now, legislative law is a marriage license, not a contract. And that's the one thing I suggest people do, write a contract in relationships. Don't get a marriage certificate. Don't get a marriage license. You can do that if you want. But the other point is do a notarized contract between you both. Certified with a minimum of 3 witnesses. Then a judge has to go by that. Not by what he or she feels or what their opinion is. And that's the one thing that people have got a corporation in their mind of what a corporation is. So stop playing the corporate game and quit destroying yourselves, because everybody wants to argue these things. They're not proving their own personal facts. They're not proving their structure out to themselves, to the rest of the people. And that's the problem that we have today. I've talked to many people here in the last couple of days about different things. And I've had some interesting conversations and arguments with people. Now, there's certain things that I will not put up on the Facebook pages, and I'll publicize who I get some of the information from. I've had people say, I don't have a problem taking the credit. It's not the issue. You already got the credit. People know who you are, especially if they're in their groups and when they're following you. They know where the information came from. They can call me out any time, and I'll publicly state it. That's not the issue. I'll publicly state how would I add it into my structure of the things and bring those points of view so it makes it more clarified. And that is the one thing that, do you guys, some of you people, do you want to be the marker? I don't think you're that crazy. The knowledge is what makes us successful. It's like one of the things that sort of concerns me. There's a lot of people decided after a political structure they're going to run from different offices. And I've never seen one of these men and women to date that I've sent information to publicly state what you're doing. If you're running for office, state you're not going to go out their driver's license for lawful Americans. Put it in it. Clarify the statements, clarify your words so people know the definition of lawful versus legal. The state of Oregon has administrative rules and ORSs where you don't need a license to travel. And I'm still dealing with that with the Oregon State House and Senate myself. And when others would like to join into that, take my letters that I'm putting out to the sheriff, the counties. Pass them around. And if you're in another city, county, or state, I don't have an issue. We don't have an issue with you changing the structure of it. But just remember, when you're utilizing those type of things, you're personally liable. So make sure when you're putting something out that you're willing to take personal and liable responsibility. You can't slander people. That's in this thing, the letter. I'm not slandering anybody. I'm asking them to prove their point of commercial servitude. And that's the one thing that we need to do. When it comes down to these points of view and we're being honorable and we're proving the real facts of these corporations, the conflicts of interest, all right, now we're making a headway. Now, I've been told by many, many people the paperwork I'm doing is totally different than a lot of people have done. Well, yeah, we're going after to prove their employment. We want their words to admit what they're doing. It's like I had one military personnel that I plan on responding back here, but I want to give a little time, stating, if you go into that courtroom, you give up your constitutional rights the minute you open that the front door up and walk it into that courtroom with a gold fringe flag. You have to inform the court before you walk into that gold fringe flag. You have to inform the court that if the gold fringe flag, you can't speak because they're going under it. You have to do the research and find the Article III court judge of that court. You want his certified oath that he's an Article III court judge. You don't acquire that oath, you have nothing to go by. See, it's like one wise elder always tells me, certified register, certified register. So when you certified register, now all of a sudden you're being realistic. You're not being a foreigner. You're not being a foreign agent. And if you don't comprehend the structure of the 1917 Foreign Agent Registration Act, I recommend you read it. Comprehend what you are doing. Recommend your statements. Because this is the one thing that when it comes down to it, how do we know what, why, and how? See, if you assume like they assume, you lose. That's why I put a lot of my paperwork. I want to see, and I'm not going to assume a lot of things I put in my paperwork. I want to see what they write. I want to see their response. I want to see their thoughts. See, you don't want to write something in a point where you're bringing their thoughts forward for your conclusion. You want to put things together. You want to hear their thoughts so that way you know how to respond to it. Either they're right or wrong with the response, but you want to respond to the response. You want to leave the door open for communication to them. And that is the one thing I can suggest to you. You know, you leave the door open to communications, you'll be getting a lot more information. You will see that things do open up, and keep your wording and your language respectful. Yeah, I like to cuss and do all that stuff myself, but, you know, you get more, what is that? You get more bees with honey than you do with vinegar. You know, because the honeybees always come back to the queen. And with vinegar, they won't. So, you know, those are the one things. And if you want to kill a wasp hive, beehive, or anything, spray it down with vinegar. It'll kill it. They go away. Say, you know, man has made different, well, I guess you would say vinegar is a chemical. But vinegar is one of those things you get rid of different bugs by spraying it on different things. You spray it with Dawn soap, you get rid of different weeds and a lot of other things. So we do have solutions that are doing herbicides and all that stuff. And so this is the one thing that comes down to the collusion on these, of how do we handle it? How do we deal with it? How do we successfully make sure it happens? And so, like this affidavit I'm putting out to the sheriffs, you could all run with it in your own city and county. You could change it any way you want. I don't give a darn. We don't care. Okay, we don't have a patent on it or anything like that. We want to make sure that you are able to educate yourself by it, and when you serve your elected and public officials, you are personally liable. And if you want to send out the same structure we wrote and ask them what they think, that's fine. But remember, when you do it that way, okay, we have already got our paperwork on the structure, and you're still liable because you sent it out. You're taking an initiative, and we respect that point. And that is the respect that all of us need to do, especially when it comes down to elected and public servants. You know, we do have honorable public servants out there, and you got to pay attention to what they're saying to you, what they're doing for you. And people say, well, they should do this, they should do that. Remember, if they cross certain lines, they're unemployable. Learn to read between the lines. Learn to listen to what people say. Listen to their wording. Listen to what they're saying. Or listen to their examples they're giving you of another story or another structure. Maybe there might be something in the wording they're using that you need to read between the lines. And that is the one thing that we've got to learn these things. And some people, oh, they need to do this, they need to do that. Well, we already know that. We're all preachers to the choir of the preachers on that one. But it's stepping out of the movie and watching the production, how do you succeed? And that's the point that we're at right now today. How do we succeed? You know, we've got things moving in the courtrooms. We're watching judges being convicted. We're watching employees, especially in Oregon, finally starting getting indicted for federal embezzlement of funds and state fund embezzlement. And the only reason why that's happening is because other men and women are writing affidavits or structures going after them through their complaints with criminal charges. I mean, there was a thing on CBS the other day, news, you know, they were bringing up a suggestion about criminal charges on employees. And that's basically all they said. Criminal charges on employees, what does that mean? And then they went back to another news story. And so it is apparent when you watch some of these things on news media and stuff, what do they mean? How are they proceeding? What's the circumstances? These are things that we all need to work and think about. So, I mean, that is the one thing that when it comes down to it, we got some of the solutions. Let's start filing on employees. We have other other people out there and other groups, you know, for Texas and stuff that are filing on employees. Let's start following them. Let's see what they're filing on, these public employees. Let's do the same thing, especially on the comp controller, especially on the Treasury. See, these things matter, even though you might not think it matters right now to you or the circumstances around you. It might take 90 to 250 days for it to go through. Okay? That is the one thing that, patience is a virtue? Men are taught that from women. Come on, pay attention. You know, sure, I like to hunt it down and kill it. But then again, patience is a virtue. Depends on how we take it and what the meaning is. So these are things that we're living with today. How do we conquer it? How do we succeed it? So anyhow, we're going to open up the floor tonight, see if anybody's got a response, and we'll go from there. Yeah, I'm done. You there?
All participants are unmuted.
Okay. So anybody would like the floor is open.
Hey, Ed.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if you got into my license doc yet or not.
No,
Okay.
I have not got totally through. I haven't really got through it. No.
Okay. There's only two places I ever found the use of a license. All right? You might want to look up the slave laws of Virginia.
Okay.
All right? That was where they started the license by 1620.
Right.
The second one is the Lieber Code.
Hmm.
That's the only two places I ever found them.
Right, and I agree with you on that one.
And believe me when I say this, you throw that into a court case, you get an interesting reaction.
No, I comprehend that, and that is the one thing, because the one thing, too, with the Lieber Code is Nixon repealed the Lieber Code, but see, the other point with Nixon, he was so corrupt, who the hell knows?
Well, I can tell you this, if Nixon did not repeal that Lieber Code, it's still functioning today.
Mm-hmm.
That I can tell you for a fact.
So, like I said, that's the point that we want to get confirmation to prove one way or the other. We want to see the facts on it. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
And see, once the facts are there, nobody can dispute the facts. And that is the one point that we're having frustration with. So many people want to argue about this or that or this or that, and they forget to come back to the basics. What is the basic facts? How was it written? How was it passed? What was the suggestion? What was it line streamed? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that is the one thing. So we're not arguing about semantics. We're proving it. That is the one thing about facts and proof. So we are proving things. We're getting it out. People are paying attention, state and national. And let me tell you, people are really paying attention to some of the stuff we are doing, state and national. Because I put it out, and then when I put out the structure out to the county sheriffs, the city, counties, and all the other people, that is going to make one hell of a turmoil headache for these public servants.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
they prove it. And you personally know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. When I put the first declaratory judgment in to the first court over licensing 20 years ago as to which one we were operating on, and I gave them the Virginia slave law and the Lieber Code, you should have seen the response I got from the judge.
Mm-hmm.
You'd think I threw a nuke into a chicken coop.
Well, and that's the response, and that's the point we want to get out, going out with everybody else, because we want this proven one way or the other. See, we have a right to question our public servants. And we know that they're going to cover their tracks. That's a given. You would do the same thing. But instead of arguing about these things, let's put it in writing. Let these people respond. When they respond in writing, go ahead.
Freedom of Information Act.
Mm-hmm.
The more questions we ask, the better it's going to be.
Right. And when they start responding, now you have evidence. See, when they don't respond, you have no evidence. When they respond, now you've got whatever they're saying in their emails or letters or whatever. You want the evidence. You don't want hearsay. You don't want them claiming this, that, or the other thing. You want them to respond to the truth. And most of us do know the truth. It is getting that truth out. And that's what stuns me, how folks don't comprehend how it works around them. It is a sad environment when you look at it that way.
I hear you.
Well, see, and like I said, I got to send you back what I added to it, because I added a few pages to it more than that with the sheriff. And they even went through and added into the sheriff's letter the sheriff history going back to England. And that came from the sheriff's website themselves, their own website. So I quoted their own website dealing with the history of the sheriff in England, of Nottingham, and it's on the sheriff's website.
This is something I'll tell you. I can't prove this. I was told this. How did sheriffs and lawyers get in the United States?
Let me ask you a question. Have you ever watched the movie Blazing Saddles?
Yeah, but we're talking the original lawyers, the original sheriffs. How did they get in the United States?
I'm asking you a question. You watched the movie Blazing Saddles, correct?
Yeah.
Did you ever listen to what Mel Brooks said in his deal with the sheriff when he hired the first sheriff, the black sheriff?
What?
It's in the movie. He clarifies it the way he says it. It's actually in history.
What's that?
Well, the sheriff were a corporation. They were hired at that point to basically protect under the Constitution that comes under the 1871 contract with the Vatican, when the Vatican and the Treaty of 1871, where they're trying to take control back under the Treaty of 1213.
The first sheriffs came in here to the United States was in Virginia. And this is what I was told. It's supposed to be in the book.
1829.
No. Sorry. They were put back on the boat and told if they landed, they would be hung. They tried it in Boston. I don't think they got off the boat in Boston from what I was told, or either they got hung in Boston. One of the two.
They were hung.
They were probably hung because I think they're buried in a special cemetery outside of Boston.
Mm-hmm.
They came into Florida, Spanish Florida, is what I was told, and stuck into the 13 colonies through Georgia.
Right. That's true.
And the person that told me point blank. He said they're not supposed to be here.
And that goes back in the late 8th or late 16th century.
It was early 1700s when they finally got in here.
Right, yeah, but it was late 16th century is when they planted it, but it was about 1701 through, Florida's Constitution where it brings it up.
No, Florida didn't have a constitution at that time. It was Spanish rule. The Spanish allowed them to land. Okay? But they left Florida and went into Georgia and went up to the 13 colonies.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how bad they wanted in here.
Oh, yeah, no. And don't forget, that's the reason why Carter was the one that brought them in. The ones from Cuba that was part of that structure to vote, and when he got elected president prior to that. So, yeah, no, we're on the same page. And that is the one thing that people have got to do the research and history on this stuff, how real it really is. So it's like everybody keeps wants to arguing that, all right, Mexico has a right here because, the United States. Well, actually, when Mexico came in and when they tried to do this with the Alamo and all this shit, what the hell they do? They took it from the natives, the Indians. That's part of the reason the Alamo, but they won't tell all that history, but there is history out there, that the Cherokee Nation and Lakota and others fought alongside them in the Alamo because they didn't want them to be slaves anymore because the Mexicans had them slaves.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all. And if you can read the Alamo history, it says it right there. That's what stuns me, how people don't read real history. They don't question the elders of elders that have lived, because we've been so convinced that an elder today is so on medication. They don't know their own history. They don't know the facts. I was blessed growing up. I mean, I talked to a lot of people in the 70s that actually came from Nazi Germany, elders back then that owned apartment complexes and stuff when they came here. And they would tell me when I was a kid, I had one elder couple that I used to know in San Francisco off of what was that, Balboa Street. And everybody would be so scared of these people, these two guys, and they were gays that came from Nazi Germany. They actually owned the apartment complex on the commercial code, because remember, they're not natives. They don't have rights to own anything. They have the right to lease it, basically, from us. And they would tell me stories, and I'm talking about when I was back 12 through 15 years old. I would listen to these men and what they lived through, why they became gay, what was the structure of how, what, why, and how. And this is something I don't basically tell people or be opened up. But these guys would tell me stuff that, and I would learn from them. They didn't try to pick me up or do anything offensive, They were impressed that this little kid would come up and actually, talk to them for what the rumors around in the neighborhood in San Francisco were about. Because remember, people talk rumors, and people would assume listen to a rumor or a lie before they want to listen to the truth. That's the saddest part about life. True fact, you tell so many people things, and then when it comes back to you at the end, it changed completely.
They want a convenient lie instead of a horrible truth.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk about Confucius. This is the one thing that, we have these things that are happening around us. And things are actually moving. And so when I put this out, and I will be having it starting to send out this week, and don't worry, you'll get a copy of the original. Of course, if I don't give you a copy of the original, you're going to find it and you'll cuss me out later, right? And then remember, I'm sending it to each mayor, city council. I'm sending it to each legislator as well, because I want my rights to travel and everything else, I've been threatened. And all this is on recorded history if you read my filings and my evidence throughout the courts, and especially 2006 Inspector General's report. They actually, the mayor, city council, and the governor, Kate Brown, at that point was a legislative council, tried to put me in federal prison for telling the truth. They attacked my family. They attacked me. And so, what can you tell from a woman? She's going to do what she wants. It's one thing about women, no disrespect to them, but we know the truth about them. So it's one of those things that when it comes down to it, I've lived this stuff. I went through it, especially with Kate Brown, many legislators. Prove me wrong. It's all over the internet. I got YouTube videos of me in their office. I've got congressional record videos of me speaking in public hearings, nailing this stuff. And there's a lot of videos that I had up that all of a sudden are being disappearing because they don't want people to see what I've been saying 20 years at the House and Senate with the facts and truth. And, that's the one thing is that I don't care what they think. My point of view is, what do you believe? Do you want freedom or do you want enslavement? Now, everybody, and I'm going to hit this point, everybody says Social Security is your devil point. Yes, it did not really happen until 1980. Read when they started changing it. And then in 1993, when William Jefferson Clinton signed the payee, not yours. And everybody says, well, immigrants pay the Social Security, they can't get it. Bullshit. Bullshit. And it's bullshit because they don't have a right to pay in it, number one, and they can't collect. That only came back from Carter. And everybody knows it's true. And everybody says, well, they pay in and they don't collect. Yes, you're hearing that truth. And they're trying to put a mind control guilt on you that these terrorists are paying into our structure that is for us. Read the original Social Security structure, not what they modified after the Supreme Court of 1937, and especially what William Jefferson Clinton signed I can't remember executive order off the top of my head for some crazy reason. But when William Jefferson Clinton signed executive order that made us all human, collateral the same thing as what Roosevelt did, Executive Order 2040. That's why the Trading with the Enemy Act came before the executive order, and that's the one thing that people need to put these pieces together, what, why, and how. And they don't sit there and comprehend what, why, and how. And that's why we have the problems. And so when we're working together, and now all of a sudden they can't run and hide, and they're getting this. Because I'm going to tell you something. I know that a gentleman and several other people or groups have put out different letters dealing with similar what I'm doing, you know, but most people have done it secretive, I guess would be fair to say. Me, I've been public about them destroying my family. I've been public when my neck was broken, when Oregon State Supreme Court threw my 4 lawsuits out of court. And supposedly I had good, I hate to say it, attorneys, you know, telling me what to think, telling me what to do. A couple of them were what I considered at the time actual friends. And that was the one thing that I learned. Attorneys can never be friends to lawful Americans. That's the one thing I concluded. Because if they were, they would lose their bar registration. And I always hate it when attorneys will tell you, I never took that oath to the bar. I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And I've had many, many attorneys go off on me on that. I've had many attorneys telling me who've won major court cases through administrative rules trying to tell me those things. And it's like, you guys got to realize that these men and women know what they're doing. They know what they're saying. They're not bullshitting you. But see, the one thing is, when you take a bar oath, if you don't comprehend the bar oath, read 1871, August 21, the American Bar Association Bar Oath. It's on the internet, to the King and Queen of England. Search it. They have modified it because I've been pushing that out so much over the years. I believe they've started changing that because of what not only I, and I'm not just saying me, I know there's dozens of men and women beside myself doing the same thing. Some of them I've had personal contact off and on in the years, and we know what we're stating because this is the one thing about proper education, knowing the deal of lawful and legal. Lawful is our Constitution. Legal is a British administration of the Vatican and religion churches of your court system, Article 1, and read your legislative Article 1 court. It even states in the paperwork of the Article 1 court, it's a religious structure. So when you're going to court, are you going to court on religion, or are you going on to court because you actually committed a crime and caused personal and property damage? So stepping out of the production, watching the movie What, Why, and How. And that's the one thing that most people, you know, and I'm talking most people who sit there and watch TV 7 days a week that are so programmed, so brainwashed. You know, it is amazing when you bring the education knowledge to certain people on these things, and they don't want to hear the truth. Well, you know, your religion is your religion. Nobody can fault you for that. Anybody who faults you for that is a moron. But the point being is that, do you know the separation of dirt, soil, and air? They're above you, the government don't own. The soil that you're standing on, the government don't own. But the land they're trying to claim under, that goes under administrative rules, and they're claiming with the British treaties of land. Don't forget, the Spanish treaties. Remember, some of those Spanish treaties were here about the time of the British and a little bit before. But who signed them? Who made those agreements? The same thing with the British. When the natives signed their structure to the treaties, and we're talking natives of every color, not just Indian. You got to remember, going back in history, there was more colors on this land than just Indian, as they call them. See, that is the point that people don't comprehend. And if you actually read the Scott and Dred case, you'll be amazed what you comprehend out of the 14th Amendment if you actually read it. Say the 14th Amendment in the Dred Scott case gave you the option to be a slave or not. Actually gave you the option in their court case and was filed. And everybody keeps going, oh, I'm a 14th Amendment slave. Well, if you're a 14th Amendment slave, all right, you're a citizen. You're an immigrant. You're an illegal. But remember, when the 14th Amendment slave structure went back through in the court case, that was back in 87? So when we look at back in history, about 87, but when we look back in history compared to today, it decided that you had the right to choose what you want. And I went through that decision when in the late 70s, and 1980 was last year in California, they taught civics. And we were actually taught the separation of democracy or the British government versus your private rights and the Constitution. We were actually taught that in school. We were taught that if you took a license, you gave up your rights. And I admire my teachers back then who actually spoke up. I didn't pay attention to a lot of that structure, what they were giving me back then. A lot of us didn't pay attention to school, but we actually had some honorable teachers. And when you step back and you review history and you view back to your teachers, you're going, holy mackerel. They actually gave me some knowledge that I didn't see compared to today. Some teachers, I don't know. I haven't been around teachers, since, it's been 15 years since I've been seriously around teachers. But I used to hang around a lot of teachers. But who knows what they're teaching today? And that's the point that you need to make sure if your kid is going through a corporation school, what they're teaching. Make sure they get the information. Make sure if they're not giving the information to your kid or the other kids in school, file on them. You file a criminal complaint that they're getting federal funding for not doing their job. Their servitude. See, it's knowing how to file your administrative rules, is learning how to file your paperwork or your criminal complaints or your wham-wham complaints. And if you're doing a wham-wham complaint, always follow it up with a criminal complaint, because if you're not doing it with a criminal complaint, you're giving the authority over to them. And most of us know that. A lot of us don't know that. But if you don't follow it up or have a criminal complaint about their funding, their expulsions of their servitude of expenditures, is like today. Kids are told to buy, what was that? Parents are told to buy books today. Pencils, papers for schools that used to be in the funding. Book and history. The teachers took that funding and the principals took that out for their personal parties. I've done the research on it. I've already proven that one. They've taken that out back in the late 80s, and especially when Clinton got elected, he passed administrative rules for them to do it. That was, what was that, the floor plan. Federal floor plan. That way they could take the funding, for, what was that, kids that were taken into custody for schools and kids were taken custody for DHS and stuff. It's sitting back and, go ahead.
I know what you're talking about. I can't think of it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the other thing. Maybe someone will bring it up. And I'll think about it here in a minute. But see, this is the one thing that people need to grasp. Some of us have a conflict of interest dealing with, let's say, Army military flag law compared to a Admiralty law that's written on both sides. So just because we have a conflict of interest, but we're putting the pieces more and more together of coming out what, why, and how they combined, how it happened. And so we can't overlook these things. Go ahead.
Nothing.
Oh, okay. We can't overlook these things because if we overlook these somatics, that's the problem that we've all got through or gotten into the last 30 years. Remember, all this shit really didn't happen until after Clinton got elected. And if you really look at history, everybody keeps saying Bush is so bad. Bush was bad. He endorsed Nazi Germany. Anybody who knows Bush's family has endorsed Nazi Germany. And if anybody looks at Bush's family internally, you'll find out his family is from England. A direct descendant of the Queen of England, not from England, but from Nazi Germany. Remember, Queen of Elizabeth is not from Britain herself personally. She is from Germany. They step out of the movie. That's why, what do they call that? The terrorizing nation we have? United Nations. That was founded by Nazi Germany as well as the British government. That was what, I don't remember his name. Yes, I do. Winston Churchill, United Nations. When they try to put the bullshit of the United Nations and the people wouldn't let through. See, this is the whole point about history, stepping out and reading all the history structure, how we got what, why, and how. Everybody keeps going after the Rothschilds and Fairchilds. They're running the world, they're running the country, and if you don't get into their banking structure, they'll destroy your country like they did with Gaddafi. Well, if anybody actually did research in Gaddafi, Gaddafi was the same thing as the United States were supposed to be. He actually made sure his people had water, electricity, and food, never charged them. If they had a newborn child, he would give them $50,000 to buy a new home. It wasn't through taxes and all that bullshit. His government, you were giving birth to a child, you needed a bigger space, they gave you the money. His country paid the water and electricity. Do the research, realize why they went after Gaddafi. You know, go ahead.
Do you remember when, can't think of his name from Iraq, not Gaddafi, Saddam Hussein used to stand out in the balcony and shoot his AK-47 off?
Yep.
A friend of mine was there one time when he did that. He said there was about 12,000 people down there in front of him with AK-47s, and he said the only thing between him and them was air.
Yep.
He said it was unbelievable. He was scared as hell. He was the only person who didn't have one.
Well, it's like everybody keeps blaming him for the Twin Towers going down. Do investigations. When the Twin Towers went down, the United States holded 8.2 billion pounds of German gold that was at the basement of the Twin Towers. It's all in the CIA and FBI reports and in congressional reports that they took from, World War II. Remember, a lot of that stuff that Hitler and all this history said, these documents, these paintings, and all this money disappeared. The United States Corporation employees took it. Your military brought it back on boats and trains and personal property. You know, some of the soldiers brought things back in their bags or stuff, and you can't blame them for that because they're giving their life up for what? But when you're going to war, what they call war, what war are you fighting? Is it for them or you? That is the one thing that most people don't get. You know, when your house is being attacked or invaded, it's like a gentleman that I got a letter that I posted up on the website. You know, guy breaks into his house, you know, trying to rape his woman. He defends the family, shoots the guy. the cops show up and shoot him and murder him right on the spot.
Yep.
And it's like, excuse me, what the freak? Those cops should be charged for murder, aggravated murder, because they murdered an innocent man. They're not exonerated. Remember, your police department, your elected employees, senators, judges, they're not exempt. I don't give a shit what the fuck anybody tells you. They're not exempt. Read the research. File the correct paperwork. And that's the point that we are all learning right now today, is how to file the correct paperwork, how to put it together, bringing these questions forward. It's like I was informed, the letter that I'm providing out to everybody coming up at the sheriff's and the city council. Nobody's ever been bold and nobody's ever done something like that before. Well, that's what I'm told, but apparently I'm stand corrected. So, but the other point is, it depends on the way it's done. Now, on the West Coast, I'm politically known. I've never been one of those that always done it by the private side. And everybody says, well, when you don't do it by the private side, you give up your rights, you do this. I'm doing it publicly. Fuck them. I want them to know who's coming after them. I want them to live if they have a conscience. If they have a conscience, to realize what's coming to them. And if they don't, I expect them to fade off in the dust. It's that simple. You know, that is the one thing that we can't be afraid of what we are doing. When we're putting out the correct information, we can't be afraid of the shadow. The shadow knows. The shadow definitely knows. The shadow knows if you're doing things right or good. How do you think things happen in the middle of the night on people? You know, I mean, if you have faith and believe, I have faith and I believe. Maybe not in somebody's religious point of view, but I have faith and belief because after what I went through 6 weeks ago or 5 weeks ago, it's not even quite 5 weeks ago, I'm still here. You know, when it comes down to it, now I can say I've been dead, or, you know, at least I know legally dead. I've been legally dead filed 3 times. But that's not bragging. And people, you don't want to go through some of the things I've been through. Let me tell you, you don't want to go through it. You want to learn from the knowledge and not go through that stuff. You don't want the physical pain and the psychological pain and trauma that goes through those things. I guarantee you. You know, and if you're crazy enough to try to do something like that, well, good luck. I wasn't crazy enough. I just did what I did, and that's what happened. You know, so the one thing is that, you know, people want to argue about the 13th and 14th Amendment. All right, we've got the structure there. Now let's start arguing about how do we preserve our rights? How do we argue and preserve our rights? So immigrants is like, I've talked to many people and many corporations, and I've talked to many groups. Immigrants have more rights than you because they're immigrants, and the 13th and 14th, and mainly the 14th Amendment states that. And I've literally had arguments with people on that one. And I bring up the point dealing with the Dred Scott case. Did you actually read it where it says the separation of the large and CC? Did you actually read the congressional records where it separates the large citizen and the small C citizen? The way they twisted the words to convince the general public, and people don't read the structure, so they miss, you know, the large C and the small citizen. You know, and then the other point dealing with on the military point is civilian, you know, and that's the one point that I have reservations on because I am not a citizen, I'm not a civilian, I'm a bloodline native. So, I mean, and that is the one thing of putting the paperwork together. I don't have the problem putting certain things in, but I do clarify in my affidavits and my paperwork that I'm a lawful American. If somebody disagrees with me, prove me wrong. My family fought in the Civil War, and to the best of my knowledge, through the paperwork that I have in structure, my family fought along George Washington himself. So when people say that the Constitution ain't yours, it doesn't apply to you. Well, I asked them, how far does your bloodline goes back? Can you prove your bloodline? Can you prove this structure? You know, and then what do you comprehend out of the Constitution of what you think your right and freedom is compared to what you're claiming? I mean, these are things that are semantics, but yes, it comes down to reality points of view that you and I are physically living today. You know, before I started speaking up, let me tell you, I mean, this goes back 30, 35 years ago when I used to question family members and question people about my structure. This is before I got my first traveler's card from the state of California, when I filed in my state of California my traveler's license. And back then, what was it? AAA insurance. Used to have traveler's insurance. You didn't need a driver's license. And that's a fact. And I still got to do some more research. I know there's about 4 companies right now, big companies, that actually have traveler's insurance with no license. And I got to get back to that one. I haven't got back to it because of everything else I'm working on. Because I got this letter that I want to get at the sheriff's, and I got the other letter I got to get back on the rights to travel to we the people. And so these things do have an effect. They do have a structure. They do mean things. And that's the point. Everything that we do have a meaning, negative or positive. And hopefully we're doing it in a positive manner. But sometimes things happen in life. We got to be realistic. You know, it is being realistic in life on a lot of these things. And so once people start being more realistic instead of arguing, how are we supposed to be able to succeed if we're not working with each other? So, anyhow, anybody else would like to add anything this evening? Okay. So, anyhow, we got over a couple good points this evening. I will have this letter out this week. It'll be publicized on the Facebook pages to everybody. And that is the one thing that people need to stand up on these things. And if you want to use this letter in your county, your state, or anything else, and if you want to change the name and add the public servants in your area, do it. But remember, you're taking the public information that a couple of us have provided to you, and you are liable for what you put out. We're not taking responsibility or liable for your thoughts, your prayers, your religious belief. Okay? It's simple. Like I said, I don't believe in religion. I believe in the Great Spirit, Mother Earth. Without food, elk, deer, waterways, and without the woman that gives us life, we're not here. It's that simple. And that's the one thing that people need to quit arguing about those points, because without your mother, and you would not be here. Without your mother, you would not be alive. And you could give me all these other points of view, but it ain't going to work, because either you are a living man or woman or you're cloned. Let's be realistic. This is not a game of life. You know, it's like sometimes when you watch people, you sort of watch and you wonder if they're cloned or not. You watch their body movements. You watch their eye movements. You watch things. You know, we could go on and say, all right, you know, they're lizards. But have you ever studied the structure of lizards yourself? You know, I mean, I do know a man that brings out that structure, out in his structure, that's from a foreign country. Is not denying some of the stuff he's saying. You know, I mean, the thing is that the way I look at when he talks about lizards, it depends on their skin, their coarseness, their eyes, and all that. And as he's referring to it to the system that's around you. This is the way these people are insensitive. This is the way these people are believing. This is the way these people are living. So you have to step out of the production of this and watch what's being said. Watch what's being collectively said, realizing what's said around you, not sitting there and judge to conclusions, because how many times have you and I jumped to conclusions and we found out we were wrong? I mean, it's just a realistic point of view. We got to step out of the movie and watch the production. So, anyhow, anybody else would like to add anything this evening? Okay. Well, I do appreciate the participation this evening. That stuff will be out. I'm waiting for a couple of confirmations back the way I put it together with a few things on the letter. I did add the history of the actual structure of the sheriff structure from the sheriff's website themselves, quoting, what was that? Oh, Sheriff of Nottingham. It actually basically says it in the sheriff's paperwork, going back in history. And this is by the sheriff's departments. I've done the research. Go ahead.
Send me that link.
Oh, yeah. No, you're going to get it in the letter, because actually the whole link and everything what they wrote in the thing is actually in the letter.
Okay.
Oh, I quoted it absolutely in the letter because I want them to dispute their own structure. You comprehend?
I hear you.
You know? So, no, it's actually in the letter that I wrote. I'm waiting for a couple confirmations. And, yes, I didn't get the other one to you yet, but you'll get it. But it's actually in the letter. That's what I want them to confirm by their own administrative rules. If they're going by what they're saying, going back to 1645 by the Queen of King of England, that they're portraying this on foreign soil called the United States 48. Remember, Alaska and Hawaii were never administrated into the state until 1859, and that was done commercially. They are not part of the 48 States United of the corporation or of We the People. And remember, they did the 48 State Corporation because of the British government so we could do commerce with them. And that's directly, and if you read the part of the 1917 Foreign Administration Act, Trading with the Enemy Act, it states it in that act. So these are things that, you know, reading the history, this is what a lot of these elected and public employees do. They read the structure. They just go along with what it says. They don't comprehend and separate the lawful and legal points or the Constitution rights compared to the British administrative rules. So it is a separation, and that's where most people don't get. Because if it's a separation, we could cut out literally 30% of the corporation employees within a couple of months across the country just on this. Watershed councils bullshit. I mean, all the watershed councils, and I've been a founding member of most of the watershed councils on the West Coast, literally. And all they were formed by college employees that got out that were graduated with certificates and graduates that were professors or whatever. They couldn't get a job in the real world, so they created a new government. Called watershed councils, so they could fund money to it so they had employment. Say 40% of your government tomorrow, all this stuff was created by the corporation. And so you can eliminate all this. Shit, we would eliminate half our taxes within a few months. And then they would have to do, they would have to honor Executive Order 192. They would have to write everything off that I've been forcing and trying to get out there. And they know it, but they can't brainwash the general public or bankrupt the United Nations. Oh, that's right. It would bankrupt the United Nations if we the people stop paying taxes and playing the bullshit. It's that simple. We could actually get rid of the United Nations by not complying with their contracts. And that's the only reason why the United Nations is in existence under 1936 Universal Commercial Code, Act 1. See, these things all have a parent of having a position, and it's knowing how to stand on these positions and how to claim your birthright. And if you're a lawful bloodline American, you know, everybody says, I'm a citizen. I'm a lawful bloodline American. I love it when I've had actual marshals and different public employees going, oh, you're a sovereign citizen, Ed. I'm a lawful bloodline American. And then they walk away from me. I can't get any more words out of them. It pisses me off. Because I want a confrontation. I wanted to hear them tell the truth, but they ran. And you'll find that happens to you. And so appreciate that and respect those people, because that means they're not going to come after you. They're not going to be around you because they know that. You know, I've been informed that a lot of people are concerned that now I've got the knowledge how to file criminal complaints and go after them. I don't care about that, because I know the shadow knows, and the shadow will take care of them in their sleep. Say, one thing about having faith is watching what goes on around you. So, anyhow, with that, we've got the letter out. I'll get that out to a couple other people. I will, waiting for comments after tomorrow afternoon. I'm going to start hitting them out to the 36 counties. I'm going to be hitting it out to the city county, and then I'm going to hit the legislative council. Because if we're going to do this, let's do it. Let's quit talking, you know, and in that way we're going to get this going from the east to west coast. And so that way, what are they going to do? Bitch, whine, control? Okay, do it. But we know the facts. And when I do email my information, it's not going to totally be private per se. I'm emailing it to the media for every elected public servant in that county, to their local businesses in that county. I'll email it to everybody, too. I'm that bashful. And once people in their county start getting it, people are getting it. Everybody's starting to realize what happened to everybody at the Moolah Refuge dealing with the Bundys. And the Moolah Refuge was turned over to the state of Oregon in 2006, and that is in the filed, what is that? The Department of Secretary of State, and Kate Brown personally knows that. I know she does. Because I dealt with her back then on that through emails. So remember that your public land, when they say it's the federal government, remember the federal government is you, if you're a lawful bloodline American. Claim your bloodline to stand up on it. Let them prove you're wrong. But remember, don't put an affidavit claiming you're lawful bloodline if you're not. Because if you're not, I expect you to do 10 years in fucking prison. This ain't a freaking game. This is to protect our country. You know, you come here legally when you're 5 generations, now you have rights. But protect those rights, pay the structure, do that, educate, write your affidavits as you're going through that, passing your assets through the generations. And just like us natives, pass your assets through the generations when they get unlawful, then that way their property is exempt and stuff. File it, do it, quit talking about it, learn. So with that, if nobody else has any comments, go ahead. Anybody else would like to add something? Well, with that, then I would like to say thank everybody for listening, participating, and joining us. New.Oregon trackers, definitely refer to that. We got a lot of information. United States for Elected and Public Employees Oversight Committees, YouTube, Facebook, Oregon Trackers YouTube, Civil Rights 1866, Lawful Bloodline Americans. Then we have the Recall Kate Brown, and then we also, too, have the Civil War of 1866, Civil Rights Americans. Already brought that up. So anyhow, with that, I'd like to say thank you for listening. Thank you for joining. Do your research. Check me out, see if I'm telling you the truth. Do your research, especially through the legal and lawful structure. And most of all, may the Great Spirit and Mother Earth that gave you life, without the Creator, none of us would be here. Thank you very much. I guess my producer fell asleep. No, that's usual. I've done that before.
All right. Well, in that case, it is August 5th, 2018. It is a Sunday, and hopefully you got educated. So, if not, get on the computers or, I don't know, open up a book and do research yourself. Because most of this stuff is...
Come to get the books.
This stuff is available out there. You just got to learn to research it. And, again, anything brought onto this show is going to be treated as hearsay until we can find evidence. So the whole sheriff thing and stuff, I want to see his evidence. Otherwise, he talks about it again. Anyways, thank you again. Have a good night. And we'll see you, hopefully, if Ed allows it, next Saturday.
I'll be here.
You thought so before, too, and then you spent a 1-week vacation on my support.
Yeah, but I didn't have a choice in that.
No,
So my decision was not that.
No, okay. All right, well.
Yeah, the
see?
kid got it. Yeah.
No, he was saying, yeah, Ed, watch your health, damn it. All right, well, we're gone. And the stream goes